This is a really bad idea.
I'm going into space, Daddy, and there's nothing you can do to stop me. Fire! Hello, citizens of the Craftiverse. I'm pretty excited about today's podcast because it's with a crafter who just blows my mind. It's Caleb of Boylei Hobby Time. He's had some amazing success on YouTube, getting his channel to over 250,000 subscribers and about 18 million views in about 2 years. And when you see the work that he does, you'll understand why he's garnered so much attention. Okay, enough with all the intros and the build-up. Why don't we just go straight to the source and try to pan for a few nuggets of wisdom, huh? Come on.
Craft 13.
Good evening, Caleb. How's it going, man?
It's going well, man. How are you?
I'm doing just great. I'm so happy that you decided to join me here. I've been watching your channel for quite a while, and I love everything that I've seen so far. You're pretty masterful at being able to create these small-scale dioramas with lots of LEDs and clear resin for water and other scenery, and it all looks just so good. So thank you so much for coming on.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me onto this podcast.
Oh, absolutely. So this is some hardball questions we'll start off with, right?
Yep.
Let's talk about the elephant in the room. What is a boylei?
That is a good question. It's kind of a funny backstory, actually. I have been very interested in aquariums, like saltwater aquariums, and I haven't had the time nor the money to make that happen. It just hasn't been wise to get started into that hobby, but I got a little iPhone app. It was like a fish, like an aquarium builder. I started building a little aquarium on the game, and then through that, I found this little fish. It looked really happy, like it was just a fun, happy little fish. And I did some research into it in the real world and found out it was so it's the Peppermint Angelfish, the Centropage boylei.
Oh, wow.
And there's an aquarium that paid $30,000 for it. And I had no idea that it was just such
For one fish?
For one fish, I know. And it's
Whoa.
little angelfish, but I really liked it. And when I decided to start a YouTube channel, I tried to think of something that I liked that was kind of unrelated, because I wasn't actually sure what I wanted the main content of the channel to be about. So I kind of wanted to leave it open to kind of whatever. I thought maybe I would do aquariums. I don't know. I really didn't have a good idea for it, but I thought boylei had kind of a little ring to it. It's kind of unrelated, kind of unused by anything else. So
That's so super cool. I mean, you do you know why the fish cost so much, or were you able to figure that out?
Yeah, so from what I can tell, it's just found in very few places in the world, at kind of a weird depth as well. And so there's none bred in captivity that I know of, and so all of them have had to be, caught in the wild and then imported. And so it's just it's a very rare fish. There's not that many in the wild to begin with, and they're hard to get. And so it just kind of drove the price up for that fish.
That's crazy. That's way more money than you can make on YouTube.
Craft 13.
I want to ask you about, like I said, I've been going through a bunch of your videos, and you're doing this amazing sci-fi western town. I don't know if you have an official name for it. Do you?
Yeah, so I've been calling it the Wild Imaginary West. That's just the filler,
Nice.
the filler name for now. It's funny. I went on a little getaway with my wife to the Black Canyon of the Gunnison here in Colorado. And Colorado has a lot of great Wild Western history, especially in the mining and railroad front.
Right.
Just a lot of really cool, rich history here in Colorado. And I was inspired by that trip, and there was a little town there that, I don't know, I was just really inspired by. It was kind of in an odd setting, in this weird landscape that you wouldn't expect a wild western town to exist in, at the bottom of the canyon. And it just kind of got my mind and my imagination racing with like, oh wow, this would be like what if there was like a cowboy town that was more fantasy-esque? And as I've developed it, it's kind of changed. But I kind of consider the little dioramas to be concept art in a way. I intend to do more with it outside of YouTube eventually, but I do want to kind of develop the idea and the world in a place where it can kind of be screen tested, if you will. I'm getting immediate feedback from my viewers, and it's been pretty fun to see people throw out ideas for it, and so that's kind of where this whole thing is going.
Nice. It sounds like you're kind of building a story around it. And for anyone out there who's listening who is not familiar with Boylei yet and his channel, it's a whole western town, but it's like it has railroads, but it also has electricity and other sci-fi elements and like monsters. And why don't you explain it? I shouldn't explain your stuff.
Yeah. So it's. You did a great job explaining it. It's essentially Wild West with monsters and sci-fi, and
Nice.
There's a little bit of steampunk worked in as well. But the main thing is basically cowboys with mechs fighting monsters. It's kind of a funny. I don't know.
Nice.
Yeah.
I was kind of reminded. Have you read the Dark Tower series?
You know what? I have not.
It's something you should probably check out because I think you would like it. I mean, it's really long, but
Yeah, that's Stephen King, right?
that's correct. And they share, I don't know if you're into his stuff or not, but they share very similar elements where, there's like Western towns, but it's post-apocalyptic, and they go into like old saloons. And basically someone's playing Hey Jude on the piano and just,
Nice.
It's just really strange like that. How long have you been working on this like Western concept and like all the different dioramas? Because they're each built individually, and he
Right.
does a video building like a building, and then he puts them, they're basically all fit together. They're modular.
So I started the Western town. The first build was sometime in late 2020. It was right after the national parks had opened up again after COVID that we made our little trip down there. So it was, I think, May of 2020 that I first came up with the idea, and then it was just a couple months later I did the first diorama. So I've been slowly working on it for about, a little over 2 years now, or almost 2 years, I guess.
I love the way you've done this. It's something that I've been trying to wrap my head around on my channel, where basically I'm making larger projects, but encapsulating parts of those projects into a, bite-sized YouTube video. But you've kind of got that like mastered. I love the way you do it. Your videos always seem to be under 10 minutes. Mine ramble on and on, but you also are able to like do a complete build start to finish, and they just end up looking fantastic. So I definitely like look to your channel for inspiration on that. Is that something that you really put a lot of thought into before starting, or?
Yeah. Well, thank you. I definitely am very inspired by concept art for like video games and movies and TV shows and stuff like that. I always love looking through the concept art for those things.
Oh, like Sid Mead?
Yeah, exactly. And so when I build these dioramas, I kind of, in my own mind, am making concept art for, like, it's just something about concept art when you just have like this idea, like this moment that's captured, and it doesn't, it's not the full story. It's just one moment.
It brings up so many questions.
Yeah, exactly. And the imagination can run wild. And so in a way, that's kind of what I've wanted to do with this. And the only pieces that fit together so far in like a modular way are the town buildings. Those will have a fully formed town at the end that will be, I will probably settle on a final layout for it. But everything else right now is kind of standalone. I may integrate some of them into larger pieces, but at this point, I guess you could say the wilds pieces, where it's more out in the Wild West and not in the town.
Right. It's satellites of the town.
Yeah, exactly. Those are all kind of standalone at this point.
Yeah, man, and that kind of leads me to, because one of my favorite concept artists is Ralph Mcquarrie. I mean,
Totally.
they captured my imagination and blew my mind. And I know from looking at your channel that you're a Star Wars fan. And it actually, as weird as it seems, I bet not to you, but Star Wars and Westerns tie in really closely together in the whole way that George Lucas came up with this whole concept. And if you look at like Kurosawa and like Seven Samurai, and you look at The Magnificent Seven, which is a remake of Seven Samurai,
Yep.
those are both films that really influenced George Lucas, and he basically wanted to do a Flash Gordon style Western in space. And it seems like you have a bit of that bug also.
Totally. I absolutely love Ralph McQuarrie's artwork, and Star Wars for sure, very close to my heart, hugely inspired by it. In fact, some of the builds that I do, I don't really realize how similar they look to Star Wars content until after the fact. So the artwork and the ideas from Star Wars have definitely made a big impact on me creatively.
Yeah, it's so, one of the things that I love about Star Wars is that has such a specific look to it that they have been able to give it to other designers, and they can still stay within that Star Wars universe. And you sort of feel when they go a little too far out.
Totally.
Like they did something recently. I was watching the Book of Boba Fett, and they had these like brand new like moped looking air speeder bikes, and I just did not like them at all.
Yeah,
Did you see that one?
I did, and I wasn't a huge fan of those as well. I think
Yeah, that chase was not very well done, and
missed the mark on that one.
yeah. Absolutely. So, your channel looks fantastic. And, I went back and checked you out, like your very first videos. And so everything that's kind of happened, like your first video, it sort of looks like a lot of normal YouTube crafting channels. And then the stuff you started doing very soon after that is just, it's got this beautiful polish to it, and it looks fantastic. And my assumption would be that you sort of garnered your camera knowledge after you started your YouTube channel, or am I off the mark here?
No, that is correct. Before YouTube, I had done quite a bit of photography, but it's completely different than video. Like the post-production, just totally different. So that has been probably my biggest learning curve in YouTube so far.
You're killing it, man. Everything looks great, and
well, thank you.
Yeah, you really know how to get to the point of things. And just like I said earlier, it's like our channels are very different. I tend to ramble and go on tangents and stuff, and it's just what I do. But I do look at your stuff. Your stuff to me feels like sushi. It's like beautifully laid out. It's perfectly presented, and it's wonderful to consume, and it's small. It's like tapas. So
well, thank you. Yeah, I've been inspired because I have seen that same thing with my own work, and like watching, like when I started my channel, I actually didn't know much of the crafting YouTube world. I had some inspirations from other people who were doing like drawing and artwork, and they would talk over top of it. I actually didn't watch that many craft channels at the beginning. And so when I got into it, and then I started seeing people like Craftsman and like Bill making stuff, like the first thing I noticed was, oh my goodness, these guys kill it with the production quality. Like the video's crisp. It's like the lighting is good, and so it's definitely like seeing how other people on YouTube are just they're elevating it from just a craft video to something more, and that's been inspirational. And I definitely know I have a long way to go with my own learning and my process, but it's definitely inspiring to see these other channels that are like pushing the envelope with just the art of it.
yeah, I mean, I definitely know how you feel about, like, I mean, your stuff looks fantastic, but everyone who's doing this, I would hope, is like pushing themselves and wanting to learn more, and has aspirations for trying to make it better. And yes, both Craftsman and Bill making stuff, I I love what they're doing because, like you said, they're taking it and moving it in a different direction. That's something that's near and dear to my heart because it's what I'm trying to do, and I think what those guys are trying to do also, from having talked to them, is basically trying to make things that are entertaining in a different way, and where it's not just a tutorial of sorts, you know.
Totally.
And yeah, yours is like is very similar because you know we watch you build stuff, and it's like watching a really good painter where you're just like, you know, you're sort of mesmerized by watching how fast something comes together and how well it comes together. Yeah, I love those two guys, and I love to see people like pushing things, and I feel that you're in that same group, and that's sort of what I'm trying to do with the Podcraft is kind of bring those people in, talk to them, and it's fun having a little community.
Well, yeah, well, thanks, man.
So Caleb, let me ask you a question.
Okay.
Word on the street is that you grew up in Mongolia. Is that true?
That is correct, yeah.
Dude, that's like so exotic. I'm trying to think of some place else more exotic than Mongolia. Maybe like Tanzania. I don't know.
It's different. It becomes more exotic and interesting to think about the longer I live away from there. It wasn't as weird, you know, as a child growing up in Mongolia.
Well, how old were you?
So I went there when I was 6.
Oh, wow. And how long did you stay?
And I was there for 12 years. And, have been back in the States for close to 11 years now.
That's some pretty formative years. Do you speak the local language?
Not as well as I would like. We were in a pretty international community there, so the common language just kind of tended towards English. But I definitely know enough to get around.
So, were you a model builder as a kid, or how did you kind of like start crafting?
Yeah, so it actually all started with the Games Workshop Lord of the Rings tabletop war game. I was obsessed with Lord of the Rings when they came out. I just ate it up. I watched it over and over and over and over on repeat, like, you know, I know a lot of people did.
Right.
So when Games Workshop, and just having kind of the creative drive, I guess, when Games Workshop released these, I wasn't even that interested in the game. I just wanted to be able to paint those things and like set up, you know, recreate the moments from the movie that I loved. And so I did play a little bit. I had some friends who were from New Zealand who lived in Mongolia as well, and they also played it, which was, you know, pretty funny that happened. But I would play the games with them, and then it kind of just pushed me to paint these things. And I wasn't very good when I was starting out, but I loved modifying the little figures and building terrain. So that was kind of my first intro into working with like miniature stuff.
And I see a lot of stuff you do is like at 172 scale, right? Some of the kits and stuff. Is that the same as 28 millimeter? I really don't know.
No. So the 1 to 72 scale is mostly just because I found these Wild Western characters. There were these miners who were in 1 to 72nd scale, and that kind of dictated the scale that I started building these things in. But I believe that 28 millimeter is closer to like 1 to 50.
Yeah, 28 mil is bigger, so the stuff you're doing is even smaller.
Yeah, it's slightly smaller.
Do you have to magnify when you're painting the figures and stuff? Or
you know, I've tried that, but actually my near vision is pretty good, so I don't ever have to wear anything.
The smaller I get, the more I'm like, okay, do I have to buy those goofy goggles?
The goggles,
with the
yeah.
light, man, come on. Well, at least I'm not on camera, so no one will have to be subjected to that.
There you go.
What's kind of like when you're building the stuff, do you have a part of like the craft that's sort of like your favorite, or what's interesting to you like when you're building?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess the process, I love the problem solving element of it. I have the idea in my head, and I don't usually sketch out what I'm going to do. I just kind of sit down and go for it, which is not always the best, and I run into problems that I wouldn't have otherwise. But I don't know, I kind of like to run and gun when it comes to model building. But I love finding the little elements, and I guess when you look at these little dioramas I'm building, they're definitely not on the level of some of these model builders who obsess over all of the little details. I don't get as much out of that, in perfecting, the eyebrows on a 1/72 scale miniature.
Yes.
For me, in a sense, when I'm doing it kind of quickly, it feels almost like I'm doing a sketch, and then I try and refine it to a place that I'm happy with. So I enjoy the whole process. I have enjoyed trying to get better at painting. That's also been a weakness of mine. I've painted on like canvas and done studio art and stuff like that, but painting miniatures was always different for me. I had a hard time perfecting. I don't know if you can even say perfected, but
No, it's a really tricky, I want to say medium, but that's not really right. But anyway, it's really tricky painting something at that small of a scale. But like the fact that you say that you're sketching it out and improvising, I mean, certainly is a trip, because I mean the end products that you do, I mean, look phenomenal. So, but I do like the concept that you're not getting like hung up on like these insane details, because as long as it looks good from like 2.5 feet away, it's fine. I mean, if people are gonna really like look at stuff in a magnifying glass, it doesn't hold up. Hey, after you finish listening to this podcast, jump on over to Boylei Hobby Time on YouTube and check out Caleb's wonderful creations. It's a sight to behold. Okay, that's all I got. Let's get back to it. Caleb, what's your favorite use for an airbrush?
I got the airbrush. My dad gave it to me, and it's an entry-level airbrush, but I used it first to paint a K2SO model. That was like my first 1/12 scale diorama that I did. And
What is that, real quick?
that's the robot from Rogue One.
Oh, yes.
The one
got
who
it.
sacrifices himself at the control panel.
You would think I would know this, because Empire Strikes Back and Rogue One are my favorite movies, and I don't know the name of the robot. Okay, continue.
Yeah, so I tried painting initially with a brush, and I had a really hard time getting rid of those stroke lines. And when I used the airbrush, I was just like blown away at the consistency and the evenness. And so it just kind of changed the game in terms of like, it's very versatile. You see people use airbrushes in a lot of different ways. But for me, applying even coats in very controlled ways was a game changer.
Nice. Yeah, I saw in like you did this thing that I thought was really cool. You did this video that was basically a childhood memory from Mongolia, and you did the it's not a yurt. What is it? What's the name of it?
It's called a gear.
Gear. And outside there's like a van that looks very similar to a Volkswagen van. And when you were airbrushing, the way you did the dust and the dirt that was on the bottom half of the van just ended up looking fantastic.
Yeah, for sure. Like creating gradients is super, super easy. And there's some really great tutorials out there, but you can mix straight into the, because it's gravity fed if you use the one with the little bowl or little cup on the top.
On top, yeah.
You can mix as you go and change the color. And so it makes blending colors super easy. If you're not adding too much, then you can, darken it or lighten it, mix it around, purge it a little bit, and then you can have a new tone to work with right away. So it makes blending colors in a gradient very, very nice.
Nice. And are you doing any like smaller areas with the brush, or you're just kind of it's more of a larger area sort of that you're doing with it?
Yeah, so I have done some of both. With what you saw on the truck and with a lot of vehicles, there's mixed opinions, but you can do this thing called pre-shading, where you essentially prime the model in a light color, and then you go over all of the panel lines with a dark color.
Nice.
Usually black. And so then what you do is you kind of put an inconsistent and thin coat over top, and the idea is that only the lines show through the dark areas. And so that is the I would do pretty fine lines in that case for those panel lines.
And yeah, that stops you from having to go in. I mean, you'll never get the perfection of the panel lines as well as you can do it using that technique.
Right.
It's super cool, man. So you started off like Lord of the Rings, and then you got some of the figures, and you started painting up the figures, and then you kind of moved on to like model kits, correct?
Well, actually, it's funny. I hadn't done anything with miniatures for quite a few years, so the whole model thing actually came way later. Once I had graduated from high school, I didn't really do much with war games or miniatures for 8 or 9 years. So my wife and I have a business, and we run it together, and we were kind of running ourselves, like during COVID, it got really stressful. And one of the things I realized beforehand, luckily, was I had not given myself enough time, and I was feeling this lack of creative outlet. We were working way too much, and so even before COVID started, I had started this YouTube channel, and I asked for a Bondi ATST, just because I wanted to do something creative again. I wanted to paint it and see what happened, and so my wife bought that for me, and I had so much fun putting it together. And I hadn't put together a miniature or a model in, almost 10 years.
Wow.
And so it was really fun to get back into that, and I realized I was really rusty, and so I wanted to get better and learn some of those things again. And then Star Wars Legion, which is another tabletop war game, but Star Wars, they released their base set, which was the Empire versus the Rebels, and I bought it and decided to make a board, like a big, it was my first video, actually. It was the Tantai 4 crashed in the sand, and I decided to record that. So that was the very first video I posted, and I had only posted a couple videos when COVID started. So I was given all of this free time because we had to reduce our hours, and so I decided to pour more into this YouTube thing and see what happened. And through that, then I started getting into more models, because I had just done the Star Wars Legion thing, and then I was really inspired by that ATST I had been given previously. So I started buying more of those models, and that's when I really started to get into the model and diorama side of things.
You just decided to film, or you were like, I'm going to start a YouTube channel, and you had sort of a clear plan, or it was more off the cuff?
So it was interesting. I had started the channel with maybe the hopes of paying for the materials at some point.
Right.
That I was using. And then COVID happened. So I did start it right before COVID. But then what really prompted my kind of deep dive into it and actually trying to do something was COVID. Hours were reduced at our work, and so I had a lot more free time, and I didn't want to waste it. So I started trying to do more serious YouTube content.
Yeah, there was a period of just where things were not feeling that great anymore, and
Yep, totally.
Been cooped up for a long time and got really down. And to be honest, it was watching Craftsman's videos. They made me feel so good watching them. I mean, he just brings something like, some warmth out in my heart. Oh, hello. I didn't see you standing there. I was wondering if later, maybe after you finish this podcast, if you'd like to come back to my channel, CraftastrophE, maybe check out some fun, weird, odd, and hopefully funny videos. What do you think about that?
Plus, you'll have the pleasure of meeting me. I'm Tinus Dare.
Okay, well that's a freaking buzzkill.
Well, excuse me for living.
Let's just get back to the podcast. So Caleb, I have a question for you. How do you go about figuring out the right amount of tint to put in resin in a resin pour? I'm asking for a friend.
That is a good question. I have definitely learned through error what is kind of the appropriate amount to put into the resin to make it look like certain things. It's hard to find tutorials online for how to work with resin and how to tint resin. There's a ton of different options. I use like an alcohol-based ink, and the one thing that I have experimented with is changing the opacity of the resin. So usually the pigments that they give you are so strong. I mean, there's warnings on the box that talk about the toxicity of these pigments, but one drop goes a super, super far way. Like, I mean, you put one drop of this opaque white pigment, and depending on the volume, I mean, you lose all of the transparency, which sometimes you want.
Right.
I mean, like I did the build with the Frodo looking at the dead guy in the dead marshes. Mm-hmm. And I mean, that was just 1 or 2 drops of opaque white pigment, and it turned that whole block pretty opaque. I mean, it was, for the amount I used, yeah.
One thing that I saw you do that I thought was clever, and I was like, oh, he's done this a lot, and he has made mistakes with this, because just the insight that you had before doing it was the one with the giant alligator. And you did the water pretty murky, but you knew beforehand that if you painted the alligator in regular alligator colors, it would just be lost inside of the resin with the kind of murky greenness to it. So you did an albino alligator.
Yep.
So that was something that you knew beforehand, obviously, from having probably messed it up, I'm sure.
Yes, I definitely did. There was a project I was working on earlier on, and I still want to do it eventually. But one of my favorite books is The Old Man and the Sea. Mm-hmm. Just love the way that was written. But I wanted to build the old man catching the marlin, and when I went to pour the resin, I mixed it improperly. I also added the wrong kind of pigment, and so it affected how well it cured, and so it actually didn't cure properly and became this nasty, sticky resin mess.
Oh, ouch.
That was my first experience, and I mean, I wasted probably, $50 worth of resin, and that was super disheartening.
Yeah.
So I have done more experiments before doing larger batches. I'll mix up a little bit and see where it's at before I commit to the entire pour.
Yeah. It's I mean, that's exactly where I'm at. I have this one thing that I want to do, and the scale is not super small. And I'm a little nervous about, doing an entire sculpture and then doing, a full-on resin pour into it. And I think I'm pretty big on testing stuff, but it does get expensive, of course, especially when you're dealing with clear resin. But I'm gonna do some testing and get some alcohol-based ink.
Totally. Yeah, and it's super disheartening when you work on the sculpting and then you put it in the resin and then you waste both.
Yeah.
Because you can't save that thing if it's part of the resin is completely cured and rock solid, and then other parts of it are tacky. You have to throw the whole thing out.
Oh yeah, that would be a bummer to me. And I don't, not so much the resin. I mean, it would be a bummer, but spending time on a sculpture and spending time on a video where
For sure.
me, I don't know about you, but I don't have a bank of videos that I can just draw off of if something happens.
No.
You're seeing the last thing I worked on.
Oh, yeah.
Is it similar to you?
It is the same. It is the same. I don't have any videos ready to go. I pretty much do them week by week.
I mean, I have a dream where I would have 3 videos that are just kind of always sitting, and and I could kind of rotate them out, give them a shelf life and stuff. But we'll see. Maybe one day. I thought I was gonna be able to do that. I took a little vacation after Christmas, and I'm working on my new video now, which is about to come out. But
great.
I had this fantasy that I was gonna be able to do some catching up and stuff, and I ended up with a fun case of Christmas COVID.
Oh, no.
So that put me out of commission for a little while. The funny thing is myself and my wife got it from the same person, and she barely had the sniffles, and
Bummer.
I was just it was good. It was good for her, but
totally.
I don't recommend it. But I'm glad to have it done with and over with.
Totally.
Do you find it slightly stressful to come up with something every week? Because it seems like you're doing a video every week and just coming up with the ideas for it and getting it done.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of stress involved. I mean, I do enjoy it enough that it offsets the stress, but yeah, there's definitely moments when I am not feeling the project, or if something goes wrong and I'm like, oh man, I don't know if I want to release this video. But my wife is super supportive, and she usually gets me to, take a step back and clear my head and look at it from a different perspective. And
Yeah.
I think there's only been 1 or 2 videos that I have not launched out of the,
Where you did the complete video and then you're just like, nope.
Yep, exactly.
Wow. I put any old thing out there, man.
Well,
You're seeing everything. It's all I got.
well, I really appreciate that. Maybe I should do that too.
No, man, never put out something that you're not comfortable with. That's for sure. But like, even just the amount of like the volume of material, because it's always shocking to me, like when I go back and look at a creator's page and you go to the videos tab and you start scrolling through, and man, you're getting into just seeing like tons and tons of work. So how are things on the idea end of that? Is that slightly stressful, where are you thinking ahead, where you got like huge projects just lined up?
I tend to have at least 2 weeks worth of ideas. And then I have a bank of ideas that I've written down for more long-term stuff. Like one of those right now, which I will be doing soon, is a full, like an N-scale train layout with a running train. It's going to be a different scale than my current, like the 1:72 scale. It's going to be quite a bit smaller, but I'll be able to fit more in that. And so, I mean, that idea has been on my mind for over a year, and I have quite a few more Star Wars projects that I need to get working on. Often, I'll look at the week ahead and say, okay, this is how much time I have to work on this. Which project will be the most realistic to complete. Sometimes it goes terribly wrong and I miscalculate, and then that definitely becomes stressful.
Right.
But usually I have quite a few ideas in the hopper, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I found that if for me personally, and I'm in the middle of reconfiguring my mind, but basically anything that I think is gonna take an hour, I have started to make it at 3 hours, and anything I think is easy, I just laugh at myself and try to forget that thought.
I feel that.
Yeah, it always takes so much longer than I think. Was there a point, like, like I don't know the full history of how things went down, but for people who are out there listening, I mean, you're in the 200,000 range of subscribers, and you're an anomaly in that the amount of views that you get are sometimes way more than even the amount of subscribers. And for a lot of people, that's the opposite. And so was there a specific point where you were like, what is happening? This thing is really like, boom.
Totally. The moment that happened actually was, it started on Reddit. I broke apart this light bulb because I had seen people create lasers or like blaster bolts and lightsabers with like fiber optics and stuff like that, and EL wire. And I was like, there has to be something brighter and more interesting to look at. And I saw this light bulb and it had this filament inside, and I was like, that is an LED light bulb, but that's a filament. How does that work? So I broke it to see what was up, and it was not very smart because it was a 120 volt light bulb. My brother's an electrician, and he's like, dude, you're so dumb. Like, what are you doing right now? Because I had these wires plugged into the wall. It was very sketchy.
Oh, hilarious.
But I got this thing to light up, and I was like, this could work as this is bright, and if I tint it red, it'll look just like a blaster bolt. So
wow.
I assembled a little diorama with an X-wing chasing down 2 TIE fighters.
Oh, it's beautiful.
So that one I posted on Reddit. I wasn't on Reddit too much, but I was given advice that if you want something to go viral easily, especially Star Wars, like posting it on the Star Wars subreddit. There's so much potential for it to go viral. And I posted it on there, and granted, I didn't really know how Reddit worked that well. I wasn't that familiar, but it made it to #1 on all of Reddit.
Wow.
And that is definitely when things kicked off for my channel, because I only had 1,000 subscribers at that point. And then, that boosted me to 5,000. And then the next video I posted did well, and then just kind of snowballed.
Nice. That's a beautiful thing, man. It's so good to see, and you so deserve it, because like I said, the videos are nicely done, perfectly packaged, and your thumbnails look phenomenal. I mean, you really just get exactly like the feel of the quality of stuff that you're doing, and your builds are just fantastic. Do you have anything else you wanna add?
But I was going to ask you, like, what are some of your biggest creative inspirations outside of YouTube and other, I guess, in nature or in your geographical location? I tend to be very inspired by the Rockies and where I live, but I was going to ask you the same question.
Well, I mean, the inspiration for like where I come from, and like, you know, the family life and stuff, that's more inspiration for like the silliness and whimsy of my channel and where it comes from, because there's many elements of that are I mean, it's pretty close to hitting the nail on the head, and that's the environment, you know, and that's the way it was. So that's the influence for that side. As far as like the crafting stuff, I mean, I've always been a person who likes coming up with concepts and sort of building small scale stuff. Always fascinated with small things, you know, and grew up with action figures and Star Wars, and just love that stuff. And so yeah, Star Wars is a huge influence on me, and then tons of other sci-fi, and yeah, but I sort of got into wanting to do a lot of like original stuff and base stories around that, and you know, and I'm not sure that helps me at the moment with my channel, but at the same time, I have to kind of do what comes to me, or there's no reason to do it for myself.
Totally.
So, but you know, and I'm sure it'll get like more traction at some point, and that will be more fun, and like I want to get more into the story elements of stuff like that. And I'm not even sure at this point that I'm answering a question. I'm just sort of saying stuff, but
that's good. I love it.
But yeah, that's sort of a loose encapsulation of what you were asking, I think.
Yeah, because I've noticed that in your videos, you obviously have your dad on a lot.
That guy.
That's pretty fun to.
I think that guy is costing me subscribers, to be honest.
That's funny.
I have to have a talk with him, but it usually goes nowhere. So yeah, you're inspired by basically the geography of the Rockies, and it really comes through in your work, and I love how, you know, like you're using a lot of XPF foam, and actually like the very first video that I'm doing, I've got a little rock formation, very first video that I'm doing of season 2.
I like that.
Yeah, it has a little rock formation, and it was basically an excuse to take a little vacation. And I've always been fascinated by, talk about inspirations, as a kid. Like I watched like a lot of television, like a lot of us did, you know. It was sort of the electronic boob tube babysitter for me.
Love it.
Well, cool, man. Well, look, thanks so much, Caleb, for coming on. And if there's anything you want to add, you can go ahead and do that. But man, it was so much fun getting to talk with you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Okay, man. Well, thank you, and have a great day. I look forward to seeing more of your work.
Hey, thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Cool. All right. Take care.
You too.
Craft Pod 13.